Hi, welcome to another episode of the Handful of Leaves podcast, where we bring you practical Buddhist wisdom for a happier life. This is another episode where we talk about romantic relationships. It's part of a series. If you have missed the previous 2 episodes on the same topic, you can look back at our playlist wherever you listen to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how can we sustain a healthy and successful relationship despite having differences with our partners. Sustaining a healthy relationship requires a lot of hard work. And today, we have a very special guest, Kar Fei, who is a motivational speaker as well as a life coach, to share with us how he kept the flame alive with his wife for 15 years. And they have dated for 11 years, married for 4 years with a beautiful child right now. At the end of the episode, we'll be sharing some reflections as well as resources on the Buddhist take on romantic relationship and true love. So stick till the end if you'd like to find out more. Now let's dive right in. Good to have you here with us, Kar Fei. Really good to see you.
Hi, Kaisen. Hi, Cheryl. Nice to see the both of you. And thank you so much for having me on this podcast.
Yes, I'm really excited to learn a lot from you, especially on the topic of growing with our partners despite differences. And I think in the ideal sense, all of us wish that our partners would have similar traits and characteristics as us. We project our ideals on them, and that can be a source of conflict. So today we're going to explore this topic deeper. And to give a brief introduction about you, you have been a life coach that guides people to live life more fully and be successful in their own terms. And you've also helped many people achieve ambitious goals, whether it's getting promoted within 6 months or growing successful 6-figure businesses. I think there's a lot that we can learn from you. You are also an expert coach. You're in the Forbes Coaches Council, as well as a TEDX speaker. I can go on and on. But if our listeners want to find out more about you, they can go to the show notes. I think when it comes to success in life, beyond the material success, we also talk about relationship, because we can have all the wealth and fame, but if our relationship with people is not good, then we don't really have that true happiness. So I know typically you talk about more corporate success and relation success. In this aspect, it's not something that you even openly talk about to your followers, if I'm not wrong. And I'm just wondering, what does relationship mean to you? Or what does successful relationship mean to you?
That's a great question. You're actually right. This whole topic about relationship isn't something I talk a lot about in terms of how to have successful relationship in life. But I've actually talked a lot about my wife on my social media. A lot of people know who my wife is. But that's a really good question, because I feel the thing about defining success in relationship is that it has to be broken down into a few categories. First, intimate relationship as well as your social relationship are 2 very different things. So I guess for the sake of this podcast today, I'll touch a lot more on the relationship, especially about me and my wife and how do we manage our relationship and our differences. For me, successful relationship, it's very simple. It is a relationship where it consists of 3 very important things: passion, intimacy, and commitment. Any successful relationship requires these 3 things. And when I say require these 3 things, it means it must have all 3. If one of them actually do not exist, then the relationship might be shaky. Let me give you an example. Take a look at our parents' relationship. I'm not too sure about your parents, but for my parents, they've been together for like 30 years, more or less. What I find interesting is that when I look at them as a couple, I actually don't see love. I see commitment. They don't hold hands.
It's very Asian.
Exactly, it's very Asian thing. They don't show emotions towards each other. The way they talk to each other, it's a lot more of a commitment rather than passion and intimacy in the relationship. Growing up, seeing them in a relationship, I can feel that it is not a harmonious, happy relationship. And since then, I realized that for any relationship to be successful, it requires these 3 things: intimacy, passion, and commitment. So that's my definition of successful relationship.
I'm really curious here. So you mentioned that your parents have been together for more than 30 years. If that's not success, then what is success for a relationship? Because I would define it as being able to last through the ups and downs and weathering through everything to hopefully to the end of life.
That's an extremely good point, right? Because if they have been together for 30 years, how can we say that it's not a successful relationship? It was, for me, how I feel about the relationship. I don't think there will ever be a term of successful relationship for 8 billion people in the world. How I would define if my relationship is successful might be very different from how you define it with your partner. How my parents define it for themselves. Because from what I see, my parents' definition of a successful relationship, it's being able to, number one, bring up the kids, make sure that they are healthy, successful, whatever. Number two, make sure that they don't get a divorce. Again, it's a very Asian to taboo thing. Even if they are not in a happy relationship, they will be contented or they will find ways to make it okay, because the risk or the taboo of a divorce is way, way, way stronger than being in a relationship that doesn't make you happy. So for me, growing up seeing their relationship, I learned what I don't want in a relationship. Because I don't want a relationship where I am with you purely because I'm afraid of a divorce. I'm with you because 20 years ago, we've already signed a piece of paper and we've committed to each other till death do us apart.
Yeah.
Right? I know what I don't want when I look at that relationship. And from there on, I start to figure out what exactly do I want from a relationship. And when I figure out that 3 things, intimacy, commitment, and passion, that was what kept my relationship going. There are times where you don't feel that there's passion. You feel a lot of commitment. So you have to find ways to bring up the passion. And the thing about these 3 things here, right, is that it is not an end goal. These 3 things is a process until the end of the relationship. So for me, to have a successful relationship is when I'm able to have that 3 things with my partner in life.
That's so important because I see also there's a shift from relationship being very functional and practical, like, oh, let's raise kids and family in order to, I think in the olden days is so that you can farm, you can help out,
Exactly.
to take care of the entire family or to take care of the parents when they grow old. But now I think because we have choice with the difference in role that female play in society, we now have a choice as to who should we settle down with. And then there's also an increasing number of divorce. I think people come to realize that, hey, there's really no point just to suck it up when there's build up of resentment where I really hate my partner, but just still stick with it. People have choice to then leave that family nucleus.
Exactly.
But I thought it's interesting that you talk about intimacy and passion. I'm a very practical person and I'm not naturally very forthcoming when it comes to physical touch. We have different love languages, right? So can you share a little bit more as to why intimacy and passion is important to sustain a relationship?
Well, I think first things first, passion is what gets you into a relationship in the first place. At least from, again, my own experiences and probably some experiences of me, my clients, and how they get into a relationship and so on. Passion is the spark and it's the fire, right? So that it's pretty straightforward. Now, the second thing is actually intimacy. You mentioned you're not very comfortable with physical touch, but the thing is, even though we have different love languages, the intimacy can be translated in many different ways. And one of the very important things to really understand as well is that to a certain extent, our biological human nature requires a form of intimacy. It can be in a form of sexual, and also in a form of just touch. It could be in a form of hugs. You don't need to do a lot of things, but to a certain extent, intimacy also means being next to the person. Without the touch, it means how you are at home with your partner every single day or every single. For example, when I have my son, because he's 2 years old right now, intimacy is something that we were lacking because obviously taking care of a baby and all these kind of different things, but we manage it, actually spend time together almost every night before we sleep. It could be just sitting next to each other watching TV, or it could be us sitting next to each other doing our own thing and just be there in silence. And for both of us as well, sometimes it's her doing her own thing on the sofa and me watching TV while giving her a massage. And that is the form of intimacy that we are also talking about. So intimacy can come from many different aspects. But the most important thing we need to know is that human relationship, human nature in general, we are social creatures. So that intimacy is something that we crave, something that we have since the days of when we're living in cave and sit fire and have conversations. We talk to each other, next to each other. That's the kind of intimacy that human beings are being brought up with. So it's a very human nature thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think scientifically, touch does create some form of endorphin, right? And it's healthy in some sense. I'd like to bring in a little bit of a Buddhist concept because I think when people think of intimacy, it's a lot of desires. Sometimes to the extreme, it can be lust. But I do feel like it can be on shaky grounds if the relationship is on the foundation of intimacy and passion, then it would be successful. Which is why I think actually commitment becomes very important because it's about loyalty. And I think to add to the mix of that three sources of a good relationship, it's also understanding, because just now the example you gave is people can be really unhappy in a relationship. And that's because there's no mutual understanding. So they are committing for the sake of committing. But what if there are ways to commit without intimacy, without passion? Because if it's only these two, then any other temptations outside of the relationship, like people give you more attention, or maybe physically they touch you a little bit more, they hug you, then you feel good, then I think that's where cheating happens.
I guess that's why it's important to, like I mentioned just in the beginning, it's very important to really realize that a successful relationship is a combination of all three. If you think about it, like you mentioned, just like if it's only a relationship that is only purely based on passion and intimacy, it's probably a relationship where you won't want to get married to this person. Because once you want to get married to the person, it's the next level of commitment, right? It's about probably starting a family, having kids, etc. If it's a relationship that is purely based on commitment and intimacy, what does that mean? There's no love, but only commitment and intimacy. We've seen all this before, right? It's responsibility, correct. And the question is responsibility for one. That one is up to the partner. But again, without all three together, then it becomes a very different form of relationship that might be what the individual needs at the point of time, but it might not be helping them to have a sustainable long-term relationship. So if you're talking about long-term relationship, it's one where all three of them are present at any point in time. I talk about these three things a lot with some of my clients sometimes. It's really because of my own upbringing. Our first role model for relationship is always our parents. How your parents are when they are together shapes how you become when you grow up.
That's so true.
And this can be manifested in many things, not just your intimate relationship, your self-confidence, your emotional regulation, how you manage your emotion. And these are all scientific studies. Scientific studies have shown that how parents actually show love to each other, how they manage their own relationship would have a positive or negative effect on the children when the children grow up. So for me, what I found out was I realized my parents wasn't really in the happiest relationship. For me, I wanted to avoid that at all costs. That's the reason why I figured what is the best way for me to, manage and maintain a long-term relationship. That's why I've been with my wife 11, 12 years before we got married, including marriage. We are right now on a 15 year. So that three things together combined is the one that really make the relationship last. But of course, we also need to talk about a lot of other things outside of these three things for a relationship to continue to last. It could be, your vision of what you want in your life, the quality of life that both partners require, parenting. All these things also play a part to maintain the relationship for a long period of time.
Definitely. There needs to be some form of alignment. I heard from Cheryl that you're actually very different from your wife. Maybe you can share a little bit more of how do you find the alignment when you're so different and what are the differences?
Okay, let's talk about the differences, right? Now, if all of you listening to the podcast and for you as I see, I'm a hardcore personal development fan. And my job is personal development coaching, life coaching, leadership coaching, do corporate training, and all these kind of different things. Fun fact number one, my wife has never attended any form of personal development course in her life. Now, I'm not even talking about attending my course because attending my course is a bit off, right? I mean, your partner come to your course and your program. I think that's a bit off, but she's never taken anything in terms of personal development space and all this kind of stuff. So it was that extreme, that second. My wife used to be a banker, not anymore right now. She works in an operations team in a bank. And at the same time, she's actually also a very creative person. Creative in the sense she's very good with artistic, taking pictures. You see on Instagram, you can see. And I'm a total opposite of that. I failed my art class when I was 14 years old in high school. So we are extremely different in that sense. But what really helped us in our relationship was our vision of what we want for our lives. In our second year of our relationship, we actually started talking a little bit about the future could be like. What do you think the world, should be like? What do you think our future looks like? And it was those conversations that help us to see the similarities that we have and the differences. And the beautiful thing about this is that we notice there's a lot more things that's similar about what we want for our life and what we want for the future. And that sort of became a vision that we constantly move towards. So that's why over the years, in different things that we talk about, that vision, that future becomes what holds us together. When we talk about financials, when we talk about buying a house, when we talk about her quitting her job to take care of, Lucas full-time at home, from having a baby, like when is the right time? How do we manage our parenting styles? All these things that we talk about, it's all aligned towards that future that we want to have. So when all these little things have disagreements, we always look towards the future. At the end of the day, what is it we want? That helps us to agree to disagree in terms of our differences. That helps us to manage some of the differences in terms of opinions or that we have about the relationship and about the family. So that's what really helped us so far in the past 50 years.
So it's almost as though there's a hierarchy of importance in terms of what is similar and what is different. And the most important thing that should be similar should be the shared vision that both of you have.
Correct.
And was shared vision something that we just spoke about it and it happened to be similar, or was it something that you worked together towards getting to a shared vision?
Actually, for us, it was something that we talked about and it just feel it's right. But obviously, I guess what really happened as well was because when we were in relationship together, we were only 19. So when we start talking about stuff, we were probably about 20, 21 years old. At the point of time, there are certain things that is shaky in a sense that we are not sure, but we have the commitment to communicate with each other when things doesn't go well or things doesn't go right. Now, let me give you an example. When I was 21, 22 years old, I started my first coaching business. And at that point of time, again, when you are young, you start your own business, of course, take all the risks you want, do everything you can. But at the same time, my wife being a very practical person, she's a bit worried, like, if you're starting a business, that means your income will be lesser than me because she started working and all this stuff. And then what about the future? We're thinking of buying a house. How we'll be able to buy a house in the next 3 to 5 years and etc. So there's a lot of questions because of that decision of mine where I wanted to start a business. But when we sat down and then we became very realistic because we have a commitment to each other. So we're like, yes, the concerns are legit, but how can we minimize the risk? How can we minimize the concern? And that was when we agreed that if my business does not take off within the next 3 years, I will go and look for a job to have a sustainable monthly income kind of thing. And that was actually what happened. The coaching business didn't take off. After about 2.5 to 3 years, I actually got a job offer. I was headhunted by someone to join a company as an internal coach. When that opportunity came, it was a relatively easy decision to make. It was a painful decision for me because I started a business. I told everyone that I founded a company, I do coaching, and now I'm going back to employment. It took a hit on my ego to a certain extent. But she kind of really kept me accountable. She's like, you know what? This is what we've agreed upon, and this is the reality of what's happening. The business is really not taking off, and we want to have a long-term plan for our future. And this sounds like the best option at the point of time. So obviously I took the job and then the rest is history. So that really helps us in terms of making decisions and whatnot. And I just want to add on to what Cheryl said. At the end of the day, actually, the hierarchy is actually very important. Because we actually hear different things. We hear also, the birds of the same kind flock together.
It's
So it's
attract.
exactly. There's also opposite attracts. My personal opinion, both works. But it's just a matter of what. I think for the very important things in our life, it has to be relatively simple. And think about it. What is the most important thing in our life? It's not your job. It's not your title. It's not how much money you have. It's actually the future, the vision, your personal values, your personal characteristics, the vision of the future that you want to have with this person, and how you want the future to look like. Those are top of the hierarchy, the important things. Those things as different are the not so important things. What you like to do, what you like to eat. Those things we can tolerate each other throughout the relationship. All these little things. She doesn't like sports. I love sports. All these kind of different things. These are small things. But if you're committed to each other enough, then these small things is easy to make.
I think you shared a lot of big words, and I think maybe good to define them, especially what are the important things like personal characteristics, personal value. What do you mean by these terms? Because, for example, someone who is a gym couple, if you tell them habits are different, that could work. They will argue with you until the cows come home. So maybe share the clear definitions, and if you could help us with some examples that could work. So
I think two things at the highest level, or maybe three, right? Number one, it's future. Now, one of the things that we need to define is that when you get into a relationship, to a certain extent, you're not thinking of the relationship for the now. Relationship usually is for a long term, for a future. Of course, I know there are people who say, no, Kar Fei, I only want to get into a relationship for the now, for the present. Well, then it's okay. But I can guarantee after 2 years, 3 years, the future thing starts to come, right? Because we only grow older, we never get younger. The future thing will come. So for me, the future is one of the very important things, which is how do we envision our future together? Now, when I say how do we envision our future together, that includes both of us as a person and also our role as a parent. If you want to have kids. If you don't want to have kids, then it's okay. Then it's just the two of you, right? And that is very important to define. For example, some people, my vision of the future is I will never own a house. But for some people, owning a house is a very important thing. Again, this is not about the house itself. This is about the principle behind having the house. And that's where the second thing comes in, which is your personal values. What do you as a person value the most in life? It could be different things. It could be relationship. It could be career. It could be you want to have freedom. Because all these personal values translate into different things. For someone who wants freedom, you probably wouldn't want to have kids. If you want freedom, you probably better own a dog. You can put your dog in somewhere else, but when you have a kid, you can't to a certain extent. So that's the second thing, which is personal values. The important thing is you need to understand what's important for you, for your life. And for the both of us, one of the common things that we found is growth. And when we say growth, you guys might be thinking, Kar Fei, but you say your wife is not interested into all these personal development thing. The thing about it's when I talk about growth, it's not just about personal development. It's not just about technical skills. It's about how interested we are to becoming a better person or to becoming a better parent. Now, for me, by default of what I do, I'm very much into growing, learning new things, personal development. But for my wife, on the other hand, she likes to read up about new stuff. All the art stuff, she likes to research about different things just to fuel her creative mind. She likes to read up things just for the sake of it. And that's her way of growing now. And how this growth actually helps us in our relationship is that when I learn something new about personal development, life coaching, and all these things, I will share it with her. And she will listen. When she learns new things, she will share it with me, and I will listen. And this is actually our second value, which is curiosity. So what we found out is that this second value that we have, we are very curious about each other. What we do, what things that we enjoy doing. Sometimes she loves to do certain things. I ask her, why do you like to do these things? Why do you have to take 1,000 pictures, when you're at a cafe, right? I hated it in the first few years, but eventually it became a second nature. Some people call it Instagram husband, Instagram boyfriend, whatever. But it became a second nature because She enjoys looking at those pictures. She enjoys editing photos. She enjoys really recalling memories based on pictures. So that for me is the two things: the vision of the future, personal values, and the last one is basically your personal characteristics or personal traits. You need to know yourself well enough to know what are the things that you can tolerate, what are the things that you cannot tolerate in a relationship. So again, let me give you an example, right? I'm an extremely punctual person. Extremely punctual. My definition of being on time is 20 minutes before time. I was actually online already, like before you guys.
Yes, you were early.
But my wife is just time. Let's say the breakfast is 9 a.m. Her definition of on time is I arrive at 9 a.m. Just on time. Obviously, in the beginning of the relationship, I couldn't take it. It
Drives you mad.
Freaking drives me mad. But, you know, the passion, the intimacy, and the commitment that I have for her trumps that. And thankfully, I have the patience to wait. I'm one of the most patient person I've ever seen in the world, right? And that helps me to really manage my own emotion, manage my own thing, and give her that space, give her that time. Obviously, my personal development thing kind of helps me to manage it. But it's very important to know, if you're someone who cannot tolerate, then probably it will be very difficult for you. So that's the three key things that I think is highly important that anyone needs to talk about in a long-term relationship.
I love that. So it seems like vision, value, personal characteristic, they fuel the passion, the intimacy, and the need for commitment. I'm just wondering, could it be a chicken and egg thing? Because what if like the personality traits or certain values are misaligned and that erodes the passion and that erodes the intimacy? Then how would you work on that?
So in a lot of my coaching work, one of the things that I notice, not just in relationship, actually just for anyone in life, is that people generally become very unfulfilled, unhappy because of values misalignment. It's what they think they want and what they really want is misaligned. So in the context of relationship, what you mentioned, when things are misaligned, it erodes the commitment, the relationship and whatnot, then it's important to actually communicate. It's very important to actually talk about it. And that's one of the things that I think work really well for me and my wife is that communication thing. It's every time when we feel there's something that is incongruent or misaligned, we will talk about it, even though it's difficult. Sometimes my wife is the one that brings it up because, again, I'm the more patient person. Whenever there is problems or challenges, I can sit on it and wait until shit happens. That's my level of patience.
So somewhat avoidant.
Correct. I'm a peacemaker, right? So I avoid risk. I avoid confrontation. My wife, on the other hand, she will bulldoze through it. She will say things as it is. She will point it out exactly as it is, even though it is painful to hear. So there were a few times in our line, in our relationship where there's certain thing that starts to miss, which is timing of having kids. Because again, man being man, I was very much thinking I need to be successful in my career to make certain, amount of money and financial income and all these things in order for me to have kids. But on the other hand, she has this belief and these values, not values, more of a belief that she needs to give birth before she's 30 years old. Now, obviously, is it scientifically proven, women should give birth before 30? I think it is highly debatable, right? It's a 50-50 thing. I know a lot of people give birth at 40, 45, but for her, it's very important. And the thing is, there were past experiences that happened to her in the family and whatnot that created this. Now, then the question to me is, which one is more important? Is making enough money to have kids more important than respecting her belief and her body because she's the one that's giving? Which one is more important for the relationship?
How do you come to that reflection? Because I would think that maybe other people might have other views, right? To say, I'm young, and then if I wait till, I'm past 40 and I have a kid, I'll be tied down, then I can't be successful in my career anymore. So there's no like thought about respecting women's body or whatsoever. So it's very wise of you to even think of that, and very considerate, very loving. How do you even come to that conclusion?
This is where coaching comes into place. Shameless plug, get a coach.
Cafe, hire cafe.
But on a serious note, that is actually true. And how do I get into that realization? It's because I have my coach actually challenges me, because I talk about this with my coach. I don't just talk to one, I talk to a few other mentors as well. And I have mentors who are way, way older than me. My mentors are like 60, 65 years old, right? I have also 40 plus years old mentors. And they actually question me and challenge me, Kar Fei, at the end of the day, who's the one giving birth? And I'm like, obviously her. So what's more important? Is making money more important, or respecting this woman that you love who's going to give birth children in the next couple of years? And that kind of shocked me, right? It's like, hold on a second, right? How can I be so selfish and just thinking about myself when this whole parenting thing is an equal thing? And most importantly, to be fair, I actually don't think parenting is equal. The mother puts in a lot more of the effort. From carrying through pregnancy, giving birth, taking care of the kid. At that point of time, then it really struck me. And my coach even asked me another more important question. It's, Kar Fei, how much money is it to have kids? And there's no answer to it.
Oh, really? I thought you can work out a math.
Yeah, you can work out math. I can tell you, right? Easily 1 million ringgit. In Singapore, maybe 1 million thing. I don't know, right? But for me, we have sort of looked at the numbers. It's almost 1 million ringgit to a certain extent. It depends on the quality of life. Will I be able to get 1 million ringgit cash in bank in the next 3 years? Actually, no lah. I mean, I can make probably another 100K, another 200K in that 3 years before the ideal age to get kids. Then that means it's still not enough. So how many more years do you want to work until you get 1 million? Then you'll be ready to have kids.
So you're saying that you don't have to be fully financially able, or like in an ideal sense, to start thinking about kids? Because I'm having a little bit of a struggle here trying to understand, because traditionally when we talk about financial management, we want to make sure that there's proper planning so that when our kids are born, they don't suffer and they are given, a good environment and lifestyle.
Yeah.
But then what you're saying is you will never be fully ready. So maybe set the bare minimum.
In a sense, yes. Of course, if you want to have kids, then you also need to make sure that your finances are in place, right? So at least at the point of time, we have our own reserves. 1 year savings here and there. We have some assets. We bought a house. We have all these things sort of in place. But I was overthinking it. I was overthinking to a sense that I need to be like a few 100K in the bank in order for me to give my son or my daughter the best life possible. I was thinking too far ahead. But the thing is, again, this is just pure parenting. You'll never be ready to be a parent. The only time when you're ready to be a parent is when your kid is born. That's the only time, right?
Even some also not ready when kids are born.
Exactly. So from a financial point of view, yes, have some money, have some savings. That's important. But don't overthink it. That's the reason why my coach asked the question, how much do you need? Honestly, if you really want to have kids, how much do you really, really need? 50 to 100K? First 2 years, probably. I actually have that in the bank, right? So how much more do you need? How much more ready do you need to become? That was when I realized that the money thing, it's an ongoing thing. Even if I make 1 million right now and ready to have kids, I will still continue to work to make more money.
Yeah, so it's not so much of a destination, but it's like you have the starting point and then the rest is the process.
Correct. It's a process of getting there. But on the other hand, for my wife, it is not. She needs to give birth and her age will not decrease. It will just go up. Right. So at the point then, it's about give and take.
It's the opportunity cost.
It's okay, which one is more important? And at the point is, you know what? The relationship is more important. So let's do it and get married and all this stuff. So that's how we kind of manage that. So again, at the end of the day, this thing is all about communication. It's really about communicating, taking time to understand. Communicating doesn't just mean I want to have kids now. If you don't want to, then we'll break up.
My way or the highway.
Exactly. That's not communication. It's confrontation. Communication is when you communicate, you take time off to really understand, to really think, to really process, and then make the best decision for the relationship.
Could you share a little bit more about how do you approach communicating on differences and try to find that workaround? How do you even start a conversation? Yeah, because differing views sometimes can get very heated and then you're just thinking from your own perspective.
Very good question. I just talked about this with actually a friend of mine a couple of days ago over the keyword is two things. Number one, curiosity. Number two is intention. So especially when it's about differences, right? See, it's easy when we talk about similar stuff. That's why couples who are very similar to each other, they generally have it very easy in the beginning. Because the whole relationship is based on the similarities, right? Cheryl mentioned, let's just say, power gym couple, right? Maybe their whole life or their whole relationship is based on the whole exercising together, going to the gym, eat healthy, work out, have sports and all this sort of thing. Again, nothing wrong. I'm just giving an example, right? But what about differences? What if one of them is very much into gym and another one is not? How can these two still be a good couple together for a long-term basis? The first one is actually curiosity. So for me, curiosity is what actually got us communicate really well. Curious about the other person. See, when we are trying to communicate differences or when we're trying to communicate, we are actually not trying to tell the other person what we know. Our job is to be curious about each other. Because remember, right? Fundamentally, what is relationship? Relationship is your relationship with another person. It's not your relationship with yourself. So if you want to have a good relationship, you need to know the other person. You need to be curious about the other person. That helps in communications a lot. That's number one. Number two is intention. Now, you need to then, when you're communicating the differences and you're trying to be curious about the other person, you need to have the right intention, especially when you're communicating or when you're receiving the communication. So when you're communicating, you need to be very clear. Your intention is to share. Your intention is not to make the person agree with you. Because you just can't have everyone agree with you on every single thing, right? So the intention is very important. On the other hand, the receiver of the communication, you also need to know the intention of that person communicating with you. And you also need to ask yourself, what is my intention listening to this person? Is my intention to prove him wrong? Or is it my intention to be curious? Or is my intention to listen? Or is my intention to understand? These two key things really make or break communications in relationship. And I personally believe these are the two things that really help me and my wife for the past 15 years. We always have communications on the dining table. Sometimes I really find it very sad because before we have kids, we always eat out, right? Pre-MCO and all these things. And every time when we are in a dining table, we actually don't really play on the phone or we don't use phone much. We actually always have conversation. And the thing is, what I notice is I realize a lot of other couples in other tables are having dinner. They are either doing their own thing, they are on the phones, or just there not talking to each other.
You're not present.
Yeah, and I find it, how is that even possible? Because for both of us, like, if it's a 1 hour dinner, we probably have like 45 minutes of things to talk, like non-stop kind of, how come other couples got nothing to talk? How come so many things to talk? And I slowly realized it's the curiosity and the intention that kind of got us into that communication.
Wary of time, and we're gonna wrap up soon. Cheryl, do you have last question to ask Kar Fei?
Maybe some questions that couples could use to reflect on, to ask each other, to be maybe more curious and more intentional in the relationship.
I think the most practical tips in that sense is, I think everyone needs to practice how to listen.
Tell us more.
And And the reason why I say that is because it's very interesting to see every time when someone communicates, it's very natural for us, especially when we are communicating about differences, or especially when we are communicating something that the other person probably don't know or not so knowledgeable about. And when we listen to those things, it's very easy for us to just either dismiss or a little bit of a passive. But if you are really listening, right, you're able to pay attention to what your partner say or what the other person said, and actually ask better questions. So when you listen well, you are able to, oh, so you're saying that this happened. Can you tell me more? Oh, you are saying that this happened in the workplace, but I don't understand. Why did it happen? See, the challenge with a lot of communication breakdown is because people don't listen. People always want to talk, but they don't listen well or listen enough to ask good questions or to have a good conversation. So the most practical skill I can give is, number one, listen attentively to the other person, to your partner when your partner is talking, and then ask questions. Trust me, asking questions solve probably 80% of communications breakdown. Because the more questions you ask, of course, it has to come from a curiosity mindset, okay? Not from a judging and questioning mindset. When you ask questions, your partner will be more likely, or they'll be happy to share more with you. They'll be happy to tell you a little bit more. That's when you get to know your partner a little bit more. That's when you get to know what really is happening in your partner's mind or in their work, etc. So for me, that listening and then asking questions, I think these are two extremely practical things that couples should do. And the third one, something that I want to share that all couples should really do, it's block time for date nights. I cannot emphasize enough, but date nights has been something that we've been doing for 11 years until MCO and until we have obviously a 2-year-old in our house. We actually go and watch movie every Thursday night without fail. It's probably 80% of the time. The remaining 20% is if I'm flying somewhere for work or if I'm out for work. If we are both in the same place, Thursday night, we will definitely go for movies by default. And that's our date night.
So it doesn't have to be like a conversation kind of thing. It can just be doing something together.
The thing is that when you're committed to doing something together at a specific time of the week, naturally, you will have things to talk about. Naturally, conversation starts to happen. Because at that time, so our Thursday date night is our movie nights. The moment we finish work at 6 o'clock, we'll go to the shopping mall. We'll have dinner from probably 7 to 8:30 or 9. We'll watch movie from 9 to 11:30. And then we'll take a 30 minutes drive home. So basically, we're together from 6 p.m. or 7 p.m. until midnight. Just the two of us. No friends, nothing, no work, no phones, etc. It's the two of us. And that generally will spark conversations. Late night drives on the highway, you'll get some conversations. The thing is, of course, it is also important to be intentional about creating times for reflection. I know some of my mentors, they actually have 5 days, both of them without the kids, travel somewhere to plan their 2023 goals, to reflect upon the years. My wife is also interested, but my wife is interested in the natural. So what we did is usually, again, pre-COVID, end of the year, we'll travel somewhere, sit somewhere, have coffee for half a day without going any tourist places. And we just start having conversation. How's the business side? What the business will be like next year? This year you're not doing so well. What about next year? These kind of conversations, what happens naturally for us. So that's what helps us is date nights.
Yeah, and I think having that time set is also a strong signal for commitments that you show up for a relationship, no matter how many things are going on for you.
Right. And do you know how committed I am with the date night thing? All my best friends and my business partners, they all know I just never book my Thursday. They knew it.
Non-negotiable.
It's a non-negotiable. So they know that it's a commitment Kar Fei have to the partner. Like, There's nothing that could take it away. Unless, again, if I travel for the whole week somewhere, right? That one is exceptional case. So if they need me or they want me for, let's just say like a Chinese New Year dinner or big occasion stuff, they actually text my wife straight away. They ask my wife.
Stealing Kar Fei this time.
Correct. So it's how we define commitment for our dinner.
That's a very good practice. Thank you so much. We learned so much from the very beginning. I think everything ties very nicely together. So we talk about intimacy, passion, and commitment. And towards the middle level of communication to build understanding, curiosity with good intention, then helps to fuel that intimacy, passion, and commitment. Together with, we talk about another three things, which is values, vision, and personal characteristics. It all has to align.
Yep.
So we have quite a good framework over here. I think the underlying thing, it's really about trying to build harmony by being present. And also, I think sometimes, from a Buddhist perspective, kind of be wary of what's our mental state, right? Do we always want to get what we want? Because not getting what we want is going to bring some form of agitation, or getting what we don't want, it's also going to bring some form of agitation. So recognizing that would allow us to show up more fully in a conversation to say, hey, actually, I don't necessarily always have to get what I want out of this, but let me just be here and see how things unfold.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good summary for what we've talked about so far, actually.
All right. Thank you so much, Kar Fei. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, thanks for having me. That was a great episode. Thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you so much. Bye.
What are your thoughts on this episode? What do you think is the most important element that makes a successful relationship? Or what is your definition of a successful relationship? Is it about the commitment, the curiosity, understanding, intention? You know, as I was editing this episode, I still have this doubt about the part on passion and intimacy. And is there really such thing as true love from a Buddhist perspective when we are taught to let go, not have any kind of attachment, and not to kind of feed on our sense desires? I felt like that part was kind of missing from the conversation. So I went to do a little bit of research and found really beautiful sayings from Thich Nhat Hanh. And this is what he said. The Buddha never said anything negative about true love. If you're successful in romantic love, you would cultivate a lot of loving kindness and compassion. And very soon, your love will be embracing. And he also gave an analogy. If you pour a handful of salt in a cup of water, the water becomes undrinkable. But if you pour the salt in a river, people can continue to draw water to cook, wash, and drink. The river has the capacity to receive, embrace, and transform. When our hearts are small, our understanding and compassion are limited, and we suffer. We can't accept or tolerate others and their shortcomings, and we demand that they change. But when our hearts expand, the same thing don't make us suffer anymore. We have a lot of understanding and compassion and can embrace others. We accept others as they are, and then they have a chance to transform. A forest monk, Ajahn Jayasaro, also talked about loving kindness in romantic relationship. In his book on love, he has a paragraph that reads, "Those who have what the Buddha called as right view would train themselves to see love in terms of the Four Noble Truths. They train themselves to acknowledge love's inherent deficiencies in order to try to find appropriate value and meaning they should give to love in their lives. They attempt to abandon impurities in the heart that cause suffering in spite of the presence of love. Their goal is to avoid or minimize the suffering that arises from love and to achieve and give as much happiness as possible. Finally, they use the Buddha's teachings to train their action, speech, and mind to lead their love in the direction of loving kindness as much as possible, inspired by the awareness of the beauty of a love that is unconditioned." So this concept of loving kindness is so important from the Buddhist perspective when it comes to romantic relationship, because a lot of conflicts comes from this sense of wanting to control in order to change things to our own liking and to serve ourselves rather than serve our partner. And like what Thich Nhat Hanh mentioned, that comes from a very small heart. But when we have loving kindness, it doesn't discriminate. It is not so much of I'm right, you're wrong, because I have this particular difference, I'm more superior and you're more inferior. There is no sense of such judgmental comparison, but it comes from a very wholesome place of wanting to support, wanting to care, and reducing and minimizing suffering. And with all of this, it becomes very nurturing. It's kind of like a relationship is a safe place for you to always turn to. It's like a home, a refuge where you can always feel a sense of comfort and security. And I think that would be my definition of a successful and healthy relationship. It's not so much about, having physical intimacy where you show affection through holding hands, hugs, or kisses, like what's romanticized in a lot of TV drama. But rather, it's really the sense that you have a very, very good companion who is supporting you on the path to being free from suffering, and you supporting your partner to be free from suffering as well. Let me know what your thoughts are and what your definition of true love is. There are links to resources on this topic from a Buddhist perspective that you can find in the show notes, or you can go to our website to read the full transcript. And in the next episode, we have another very special guest, Siu Lin, who is experiencing stage 4 breast cancer. And she shares her journey on how she experiences the entire process and sheds some light on how friends and loved ones can be of better support. What are the best things to say and what not to say when you find out that your loved one has been diagnosed with cancer. So till the next episode, may you stay happy and wise, and may you cultivate boundless love. See you.